It was just after 2 in the morning when the 911 dispatch center in Rosedale, Missouri, received a call that would shake the quiet town to its core. The dispatcher answered routinely. 911, what's your emergency? There was no immediate response. Only static. Then a voice, faint, trembling like someone trying not to be heard, whispered, "He's in the house." The line went silent. A high-pitched screech of feedback pierced through the speaker, followed by one final blood-chilling sound, a woman's scream. And then, the call ended. The call was traced to 128 Brookpine Drive, a house that had sat empty for nearly a decade. No lights were ever on. No cars in the driveway. Just a fading for sale sign hanging crookedly by the mailbox. Neighbors had stopped asking questions years ago. Within minutes, Officers Daniels and Vega arrived on scene. Their dashcam footage showed the house as they approached, dark, still, and silent. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. But as they stepped onto the porch, both officers paused. The front door was unlocked. Daniels knocked. No answer. He slowly pushed the door open. Their body cameras recorded everything. The house was cold inside. Not just physically but emotionally, like walking into a forgotten memory. The air smelled like dust and damp wood. Yet, to their surprise, the lights in the hallway were flickering. Not burned out, flickering. As if someone had just flipped the switch a few moments before. They swept through the living room first. The furniture was old but arranged neatly. No cobwebs. No signs of decay. A thin layer of dust lay across most surfaces, but in the center of the coffee table sat a glass of water, still half full. In the kitchen, a kettle sat on the stove. The base was warm to the touch. A chair was pulled out like someone had been sitting there just moments ago. Then Daniels saw it, a journal lying open on the counter. The pages were yellowed, but the ink on the final entry was fresh, still wet. He read it aloud. "He's back. I saw his car again. If you're reading this, please help me. I don't think I'll make it out this time." Chills ran down their spines. Someone had been in the house. Recently. But there was no one there. The officers conducted a full sweep. First floor, upstairs bedrooms, closets, bathrooms. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No footprints. No one hiding. Then in the upstairs hallway, Officer Vega stopped suddenly. At the top of the staircase lay a woman's shoe, small, dusty, and oddly placed. It hadn't been there on their way up. Daniels confirmed it. He reviewed his body cam footage in real time. The stairwell had been cleared just minutes ago. Someone, or something, had moved it. Now fully alert, they searched the attic, the garage, the backyard. But it was the same everywhere. Stillness, silence, and a sense of unease they couldn't explain. They returned to the living room. The journal was gone. Back at the station, tech support pulled the 911 call's metadata. The results left everyone stunned. The call had come from the house's landline, which had been disconnected since 2013. According to phone company records, the number was no longer active. There was no way for a call to be made from that line. Yet the timestamp was clear. The call was real. And the voice sounded eerily familiar. The next morning, detectives reopened an old file from over a decade earlier. Lila Monroe, a 29-year-old elementary school teacher who had disappeared without a trace from 128 Brookpine Drive in late 2012. Her husband, Adam Monroe, claimed she had left him and fled town. Police had no evidence of foul play, and with no body, no leads, and no signs of struggle, the case eventually went cold. But now, 10 years later, the same address, the same fear in a woman's voice, and a journal with a desperate plea had brought Lila's name back into the spotlight. Detective Farrow, a seasoned investigator who had worked on the original case, was called in. He stared at the landline number on the 911 log, his face pale. That was Lila's phone. "She used to call me from that line when we were working on the Neighborhood Watch program. I'd know that voice anywhere." That evening, Daniels reviewed his body cam footage again, frame by frame. At one point, during a slow pan of the kitchen, he noticed something strange. A reflection in the microwave door. It was brief, a blur of a face peeking from behind the basement door. But when they searched the basement, it was empty. Or so they thought. As Daniels paused the footage again, focusing on the face, he zoomed in. It wasn't just a shadow or a trick of the light. It was a woman. Eyes wide. Mouth open. Silent. Pleading. The microwave door had captured what no one else saw. And the basement may not have been as empty as they believed. What officers discovered inside the forgotten home was just the beginning. The basement door groaned as Officer Daniels pushed it open. The air shifted instantly, thicker, colder. The faint smell of mildew crept up the stairs. Both Daniels and Vega stood at the top, flashlights drawn, scanning the darkness below. They had returned to 128 Brookpine Drive after discovering the strange reflection in Daniels' body cam footage. A woman's face, half hidden, caught in the microwave's glass. There had been no one in the basement during their first search. At least that's what they thought. The stairs creaked under their weight as they descended, their beams slicing through cobwebs and shadows. The basement was unfinished, cracked cement floors, exposed pipes, and walls that hadn't seen fresh paint in years. Shelves lined with paint cans and rusted tools stood undisturbed. But then Officer Vega noticed something. On the far wall, just behind a leaning storage cabinet, was a thin seam, barely visible but definitely not part of the original structure. A wall within a wall. Daniels helped pull the cabinet aside, revealing a patch of drywall with a faint outline of a door. No knob. Just a small hole like a missing lock mechanism. And smeared faintly across the drywall, written in what looked like red chalk or dried paint, was a message. "Help me. He comes when it's dark." Vega's hands trembled as he pushed against the panel. It gave way with a soft pop, revealing a narrow corridor behind it. The temperature dropped noticeably. The flashlight beams flickered briefly as if reacting to something unseen. Daniels radioed it in. "This is Officer Daniels. We found a concealed passage in the basement of 128 Brookpine. Requesting backup. Proceeding to investigate." They entered the passage. The corridor stretched about 20 feet, carved directly into the earth. The walls were crude, roughly dug. At the end was a small iron door, old, scratched, and reinforced. Someone had built this intentionally. Daniels tried the handle. Locked. Then Vega noticed something else. Above the doorframe, hidden behind a wooden beam, was a tiny motion sensor camera, long dead but still pointing directly at them. Someone had been watching this hallway. And then, they heard it. A soft thumping sound like a heartbeat, echoing faintly from the other side of the door. Rhythmic. Human. They both stepped back. Back at the precinct, Detective Farrow reviewed the history of the property. What he uncovered only deepened the mystery. After Lila Monroe's disappearance in 2012, her husband Adam sold the house 3 years later to a shell company with no listed owner. The property changed hands twice more, but every sale circled back to the same anonymous LLC. No one ever lived there. No maintenance. No listings. Just silence. It was like someone was trying to erase the house, Farrow said, but still keep an eye on it. As for Adam Monroe, he had moved to another state, remarried, and was working at a private security firm. But what bothered Farrow most was how calm Adam had been during the original investigation. No grief. No panic. Just resignation. She left, Adam had said in 2012. She didn't want to be found. Later that evening, Daniels received the forensic report from the journal found in the kitchen. The ink used was traced to a pen manufactured in late 2024, a model that didn't exist back when Lila vanished. This wasn't a ghost from the past. Someone was in that house recently, and they were asking for help. With a warrant in hand and full backup, officers returned to the property the following morning. This time they were prepared. They cut through the iron door. Behind it was a small room, bare concrete, a cot with torn blankets, empty food containers, and chains bolted to the wall. But no one was there. Or so it seemed. Officer Vega spotted it first, a small vent behind the cot. Recently unscrewed. Dirt on the floor led toward it. Whoever had been inside that room was now gone. Daniel stepped out for air, frustrated and shaken. Just as he reached the front yard, a neighbor across the street, an older woman named Mrs. Calloway, called out to him. "Officer? Are you looking into that house again?" Daniels nodded. "You've seen anything unusual?" Mrs. Calloway hesitated. Then she spoke quietly. "I saw a man go into that house 2 nights ago. Tall, bald, drove a black SUV. I thought it was a realtor or something. He had keys." Daniel stiffened. "You're sure?" "Positive," she said. "He looked angry, like he didn't want to be seen." She handed over her doorbell camera footage. And there he was, clear as day. Adam Monroe. Detective Farrow drove straight to Adam's new residence that night. When he arrived, Adam wasn't home. But parked out front was a black SUV with a Rosedale parking tag on the dashboard, dated 2 nights ago. The pieces were falling into place. Adam Monroe had been inside the house. The same house he sold years ago under fake names and shell companies. The same house where a journal begged for help, and a secret room contained chains and shadows. Farrow stood in the driveway staring at the SUV, his heart pounding. He didn't need a warrant to see what was in plain sight. Inside the vehicle's back seat, barely visible through the tinted window, was a torn notebook, identical to the one found in the house. And sitting on top of it was a woman's shoe, the match to the one from the staircase. Detective Farrow turned his headlights, lit up the driveway. The same black SUV now moving. But no one was behind the wheel. The vehicle was driving itself down the driveway, in reverse. He ran forward, shouting for backup. But by the time the car stopped and officers surrounded it, the back seat was empty. The shoe was gone. The notebook was gone. And on the driver's seat? A sticky note with just 4 chilling words. "You're already too late." Everyone thought Lila was gone. But now, the truth begins to surface. The note left in the SUV sent chills through the entire Rosedale Police Department. "You're already too late." It was handwritten in rush strokes, ink slightly smudged. But it wasn't just the message that disturbed Detective Farrow, it was the fact that someone had been watching, tracking their every move, and had access to places they thought were secure. Someone was playing a game. And they were always one step ahead. Farrow ordered a full sweep of Adam Monroe's property. Officers found multiple items of interest. A burner phone hidden in the garage. A lockbox with photographs, some of Lila smiling. Others blurry and seemingly taken without her knowing. And a USB drive labeled Confession. The drive was immediately turned over to tech analysts. Inside were 3 video files. The first clip showed Adam Monroe sitting alone in a dark room. He looked thinner than in his recent photos. Pale, sweating. He glanced nervously at the camera before speaking. "If anyone finds this, I didn't do it. I didn't start it. But I couldn't stop it either." Lila knew too much. She tried to expose him. Farrow leaned in. "Expose who?" The video continued. Adam's voice shook. "There was another man. Always around. Said he was watching for safety. But he controlled everything. Our phones, our house, our lives. When Lila found the hidden cameras in the vents, she panicked. She said we had to leave, but then she vanished." Adam looked off camera. "He told me she ran away. But I've never seen her since. I don't even know if she's alive." The video cut to static. The second video was even more disturbing. It was dated just 2 nights ago. The footage, grainy and colorless, appeared to come from a basement camera. Lila's basement. The timestamp matched the night of the 911 call. The camera showed a woman, disheveled, barefoot, crouched in the corner of the hidden room behind the iron door. Her face was blurred due to poor lighting, but her posture was unmistakable. Terrified, exhausted, and desperate. She looked toward the camera, held up a torn notebook page and mouthed the words, "Please, help me." Then just as quickly, a shadow passed across the screen. A man's silhouette. The woman dropped the paper and backed away. The video ended. The third file was audio only. Heavy breathing. Footsteps. A deep voice muttering something unintelligible. Then, at the very end, a phrase that repeated twice, clear, sharp, and deliberate. "Don't trust the mirrors. She's behind the mirror." Detective Farrow paused the clip. His hand trembled slightly. He turned to Officer Vega. "Get me that floor plan of 128 Brookpine. I want every inch of that house re-examined. Especially the mirrors." Back at the house, Vega and Daniels did just that. They returned with a forensics team, this time focusing entirely on the walls behind mirrors, picture frames, and shelves. And their instincts paid off. Behind the large bathroom mirror upstairs, they found a false panel, barely wider than a person. Inside it was a narrow crawl space, leading directly to a hidden viewing room. A chair. Wires. A bank of dusty monitors. Most of them fried, but one still flickering with static. Someone had been watching the entire house for years. Taped to one of the monitors was a note. In shaky handwriting. "He lies. I'm not dead. Look under the red floor tile. Closet. Upstairs." Officers rushed to the master bedroom closet. The floor was carpeted but easily pulled back. In the corner, just beneath an old coat rack, was a red ceramic tile, loose at the edges. Daniels pried it up. Beneath it was a sealed compartment. Inside, a cell phone, a wedding ring, and a flash drive wrapped in plastic. The phone was dead. But the flash drive contained one chilling file. A journal entry. Written by Lila herself. Day 67. "I don't know what day it really is. He brings food sometimes but never speaks. I've stopped trying to escape. I don't know where he goes when he's not watching. If someone finds this, tell them Adam wasn't the one. There's another man. He knew things. My classroom. My students. My sister's address. He used to say, 'I can erase you.' I think he did. But I'm still here. And I remember." Vega looked up from the screen. She's alive. Or at least she was when she wrote this. Farrow wasn't convinced Adam was innocent. But one thing was clear. Someone else had been orchestrating this from the shadows. Someone smart enough to wipe cameras, block phone signals, and manipulate even the investigators. And they weren't finished yet. 2 days later, a new lead arrived. An email. No sender. No traceable address. It contained only a subject line, "You're getting close." And one image. A live photo feed. Of a woman. She was thin, bruised, but alive. Her eyes wide. The timestamp confirmed it. The image was taken just minutes before it was sent. Daniels and Farrow stared in disbelief. She was in a room they hadn't seen before. A brick wall, a single cot, and a light bulb hanging from a chain. But most telling? Behind her was a symbol, a large triangle painted in red, with a single word beneath it. Watch her. The camera zoomed in slightly before the feed abruptly cut out. Detective Farrow leaned back, stunned. She's not just being held. This is organized. This is a network. At that very moment, the precinct's lights flickered. A quiet thud echoed from the evidence room. Officers rushed in. The flash drive was gone. And taped to the empty evidence shelf was a Polaroid photo. It showed Farrow himself, standing in front of Brookpine Drive. The photo had been taken from behind. And scribbled in red ink across the bottom were 5 haunting words. "I see you from here." What they discovered beneath the church changed everything. Detective Farrow had seen a lot in his years on the force. But this was beyond anything he'd ever encountered. Someone had broken into the evidence room. They stole the most important clue in the entire case, the flash drive with Lila's recorded journal entry. And in its place they left a photo that made his blood run cold. A picture of himself, taken from behind, at the scene, with 5 red words scrawled beneath it. "I see you from here." This wasn't just about Lila anymore. Whoever was behind this was watching the investigators too. Farrow called an emergency meeting. "Who has access to the evidence room?" he asked. Only 3 names came up. All trusted. All with alibis. There was no sign of forced entry. No broken locks. No camera footage. It was like the drive had vanished into thin air. But then Daniels remembered something. The Polaroid. The symbol on the back. It wasn't just a camera mark. It was a red triangle with a dot in the center. Vega pulled up files from old cases. "I've seen that before. In an abandoned church. On the east side. 5 years ago." The church had been closed down after a string of disturbing events. Missing persons, animal remains in the basement, strange symbols carved into pews. Locals called it cursed. The building was still there. Run down. Forgotten. Farrow, Vega, and Daniels arrived just before sunset. The place was silent, surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusted fences. The front door was boarded shut, but the side entrance had been forced open. They stepped inside. Dust filled the air. Everything creaked. But what stood out immediately were the markings. Red triangles. Dots in the center. Painted on walls, chairs, even the pulpit. And then they heard it, a faint beeping. It was coming from under the floorboards near the altar. They pried up the wood and discovered a trapdoor. Beneath it, a narrow set of stairs leading into the dark. At the bottom they found a cold, stone chamber. A makeshift room, lit by a dim lantern. On the walls, photographs. Dozens of them. All of Lila. Some recent, some from years ago. One showed her standing outside a school. Another, sitting at a cafe, unaware she was being watched. There was a corkboard pinned with names, dates, locations like a timeline. And at the center, Lila Monroe, the original. They weren't just watching her. They were studying her. Daniels opened a drawer in the desk nearby and pulled out a book. Not just any book, a black leather journal. The handwriting matched Lila's. Inside were entries no one had ever seen. He said if I stopped asking questions I'd be safe. But I couldn't. The other girls, no one even knows they're missing. They all looked like me. Same hair. Same height. He called them replacements. I think I was the first. And now I'm the only one left. Vega turned pale. This isn't just a kidnapping. This is a pattern. He's been taking girls who look like her, for years. Suddenly they heard a click behind them. A hidden door opened. It led to a second room, smaller. With a bed. Chains on the wall. And on the floor a single item. A necklace. With the letter L engraved. It was Lila's. Daniels crouched down inspecting the ground. The dust here, it's been disturbed. Someone was in here. Recently. The realization hit them all at once. Lila had been here. Not months ago. Days ago. Maybe even hours. And they'd just missed her. Vega's phone buzzed. No caller ID. Just a single word. Stop. Farrow answered. No voice. Just static. And then. She's not yours to find. You open one more door and you'll never close it again. The line went dead. The signal had been traced to a tower just 3 blocks from the church. This was local. They were close. On the way back to the precinct, Vega pulled up missing persons reports from the last 10 years. Girls between 25 and 35. Brunette. Slim build. All gone without a trace. A pattern emerged. All from nearby towns. All with no official links to each other. But Farrow noticed something else. Each girl was reported missing on the same date. June 7th. And today was June 6th. They had less than 24 hours before whoever was behind this would take another one. Back at the precinct, Farrow and his team reviewed all the evidence. The missing girls. The timeline. The recordings. The photo. And now a new date to watch, June 7th. If their theory was right, someone was planning to strike again. And they had less than a day to stop it. But the most disturbing part? Lila Monroe wasn't the only victim. She may have been the first. But she might not be the last. 1 hour can change everything. Detective Farrow didn't sleep that night. The discovery of the flash drive had thrown him off balance, but the chilling video he had seen, Lila's desperate whisper, the woman with her necklace, left him with more questions than answers. They were close. He could feel it. The whole team was on edge, their minds racing, processing all the new evidence. But Farrow couldn't shake the sense that time was running out. June 7th was just hours away. By dawn, the investigation had escalated. Vega worked overtime to cross-reference missing person reports, confirming that the pattern was no coincidence. Lila wasn't the only one to disappear on that specific day. There was a long history of abductions, each one happening exactly on June 7th. Every year. It was almost as if someone had been counting down to this day. Daniels walked into the conference room holding a stack of files. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharper than ever. "We've got a hit," he said, throwing the files onto the table. Farrow leaned forward, anxious. "What do you mean?" Daniels flipped open the first folder. There was a woman named Jessica Holloway, reported missing 5 years ago. Same age as the others. Same description. She vanished the same night Lila first went missing. And she was never found, Farrow said, remembering the case from earlier in his career. The one that had gone cold. "That's the thing," Daniels continued. "She wasn't just missing. The case was sealed. Everything was wiped clean, no public record. It was like she didn't even exist." Farrow's mind raced. If they could connect Jessica's disappearance to Lila's, they might find the link to the larger operation. But it wasn't just the missing women that troubled him, it was the date. Every year it happened, and every year a new girl was taken. The team met at the precinct's war room, where the corkboard had grown overcrowded with notes, photos, and connections. They had been working tirelessly to connect all the dots, but there was something they hadn't noticed before. At the center of the board, pinned under the string, was a single word. June 7th. It was bold. It stood out. Farrow circled it with a red marker. There's something here. Someone is marking this day on the calendar for a reason. It's not just a coincidence. Vega nodded, pulling up the records for the last 3 June 7ths. Each one of these girls went missing without a trace. No one remembers seeing anything strange. Nothing in the area. No witnesses. It's almost like they just vanish. Daniels frowned. What if it's not just a matter of timing? What if they're targeting someone specifically? Farrow's instincts flared. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. We're missing something big, but we don't know what it is yet. Vega pulled up photos of the local town, and then a map of the surrounding area. She traced a line across the town, pointing to a building hidden in plain sight. The same building they'd passed earlier that week, the one they had been warned to stay away from. The old church. The eerie sense of dread in the pit of Farrow's stomach grew heavier. He couldn't shake the feeling that the church was more than just a dead end. It was the key. The team had already searched it once, but now they needed to go back, this time with a better understanding of what they were dealing with. Farrow, Daniels, and Vega made their way to the church. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that unsettles you even in daylight. The door creaked as they entered, the familiar scent of mold and dust filling the air. Inside, everything seemed unchanged, but there was something different now. A chill in the air. The low hum of something hidden. And beneath the floor, where they had discovered the trapdoor, was the sense that they were being watched. Daniels led the way, shining a flashlight down the narrow stairwell. The stairs creaked underfoot as they descended, their footsteps echoing in the cold air. At the bottom they saw it again. The markings. The red triangles. The strange symbols. Each one seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. But this time the walls weren't the only thing that had changed. In the center of the room, a new object stood out. A large chest, wooden and worn with iron bindings. It hadn't been there during their last visit. Without speaking, Farrow approached the chest. He hesitated, his hand resting on the lid. Something told him this was it. This was the answer they had been searching for. He opened it slowly. Inside he found more photographs. Not just of Lila but of other girls, each with the same red triangle symbol stamped on their bodies. It was as though they were marked. And there, in the back of the chest, a small, folded note. Farrow unfolded it with trembling hands. The message inside was brief. "You're too late. She's already gone." The ink was fresh. It wasn't old at all. A cold realization gripped Farrow's chest. Lila wasn't just missing, she was being held somewhere, and whoever was behind this operation had planned it all along. Every June 7th. Every year. This wasn't a coincidence. Just then Vega's phone buzzed. She answered quickly. "It's a tip. The address, it's nearby." Farrow's heart skipped. The lead was about to break wide open. They rushed out of the church and into the car, racing toward the address. The sun was setting and the clock was ticking. They were running out of time. They arrived at the address, a seemingly ordinary house on a quiet street. But something felt off. As they approached the door, they noticed the lights flickering inside. Farrow pushed the door open. It was empty. No one was home. But on the kitchen counter, a single object caught their attention, a black leather journal. Farrow picked it up, flipping it open. The first page read, "They're waiting. And this time you won't find her." The message was clear. They were about to face something far worse than they had imagined. The truth they never wanted you to know. Farrow's pulse quickened as the masked individuals closed in. The dim light in the basement seemed to flicker more with each step they took toward him. The room felt smaller, and the walls, once so distant, now seemed to be closing in around him. In his mind, the pieces were finally falling into place. But there was no time to process it fully. He could feel the weight of the situation, the danger pressing in from all sides. His breath came faster. His hand tightened on his gun. Daniels was still struggling with one of the individuals, but Farrow knew he couldn't rely on him for backup. The masked individuals in the room weren't just after Lila. They were after something far more significant. This was their final play. As the masked individuals inched closer, Farrow quickly weighed his options. The path out of the basement was blocked. He couldn't risk running with Lila. He had to confront the truth now. In the corner of his eye, he noticed something, a faint glow coming from the far side of the room. A box, barely visible in the shadows, but it was different. Something about it drew him in. His gut told him that this was it, the final key. Farrow made his move. With quick, calculated steps, he turned and rushed toward the box. As he approached, the masked individuals lunged forward, but it was too late. Farrow reached the box, pried it open, and found documents. He scanned the papers. They were photos, records of the missing women, but they weren't just pictures. Each file contained dates, locations, names, everything linked to June 7th. It was becoming clear. The ritualistic disappearances, the patterns, the ties to the date, it was all there. These weren't just random abductions. They were orchestrated. By someone. Someone who had been pulling the strings for years. Farrow's hands shook as he flipped through the documents. There, on the last page, was the most chilling piece of information. A list of names, but one name stood out. It was a name Farrow knew all too well. His own. Before Farrow could react, one of the masked individuals grabbed him from behind, pulling him away from the box. The gun slipped from his grasp, skidding across the floor. The room seemed to spin, and for a moment he thought everything was over. But then Lila, who had been quietly watching the scene unfold, lunged at the individual nearest to her. She grabbed a sharp metal rod lying on the floor, and with a swift motion she struck. The masked person dropped to the ground, stunned. "Go!" Lila shouted. "Get out of here!" Farrow didn't hesitate. He grabbed the documents and ran, pushing past the remaining individuals as they scrambled to regroup. They burst out of the basement, the air heavy with tension, but they weren't safe yet. Farrow's mind raced, processing everything he had learned in that dark room. The truth was more than just a missing person case. It was a conspiracy, and it had been in motion long before he ever walked into this town. They reached the back door of the house, but as they stepped outside, they saw something that froze their blood. More individuals. Not just one or two. Dozens. They were waiting. Watching. The street, which had seemed so quiet earlier, was now a trap, and it was clear that Farrow and Lila were caught in the middle of it all. Farrow glanced at Lila. There was no time to process this. They had to act now. "We need to get to the car," Farrow said urgently. But as they turned toward the driveway, another figure emerged from the shadows, this time without a mask. It was Deputy Simmons, the officer who had been assigned to the case from the start. The one who seemed too quiet, too calm. And now, standing in front of them, his face twisted into a cold smirk. "You should have left when you had the chance," he said, his voice low. "It's already too late for you." Farrow's heart dropped. It was all coming together now, the missing pieces, the quiet connections he'd missed, the hidden truth. Simmons was part of it. Everything they thought they knew was wrong. The conspiracy was bigger, deeper, and more dangerous than anyone had realized. And with Deputy Simmons standing in their way, the truth may never be fully uncovered. But one thing is certain. Farrow and Lila are closer than ever to exposing the full extent of this operation. What will happen next? Will they escape? Who else is involved in this web of deceit? The investigation is far from over. If you want the truth, keep following. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Who do you think is behind it all? Don't forget to subscribe for more updates.